Nostalgia is a powerful thing. Whether for better or for worse, Transformers thrives off nostalgia. Heck, we have an entire genre of toy line dedicated to reimagining classic characters with modern engineering. However, when looking back at older lines, oftentimes there is one thing we tend to not think. Was this line actually good, or is nostalgia just warping my view? I've decided to take this into consideration myself. My next series of reviews is gonna be dedicated to a line that is very rich with nostalgia for me. The 2007 Transformers line. My name is Sint, and today on Sint Reviews, we're gonna be taking a look at Transformers movie, Jazz. Jazz was released in 2007 as part of the second wave of the Deluxe lineup, and initially retailed for about $10. He was part of the first non-preview wave.
Starting off in alt mode as we usually do, Jazz is a 2007 Pontiac Solstice, which is a very, very pretty car. Now, this particular representation of the Solstice is quite a bit out of scale. He's actually one of the larger deluxes in the line, despite how small the Solstice is. But overall, just glancing over it, it's a very solid representation of the vehicle. While the alt mode doesn't really have much in the way of paint, the paint it does have is very nicely applied, such as headlights, fog lights, and the tiny Pontiac symbol right there, as well as the painted taillights there at the back. In addition, you can see he has some molded in seats and a molded in steering wheel in there. In addition to the paint, the molded detail is very solid on this alt mode. You can see intake vents right there. Very nice. Molded in double grille, like on the real car, of course. More intake vents there on the side. Curiously, 2 gas caps, and like I said, the molded interior, and even a little space for the license plate back here. Overall, when it comes to dealing with the license alt mode, Transformers pulls it off very, very well. I know some people do find the silver used to be a little dull, and for people who find it dull, the premium edition Jazz does have a nice metallic sheen to it that makes this look very dull by comparison, but overall, I think this looks just fine as is. The weapon here can plug onto the spoiler, and it can be aimed, and you can stretch it out a bit, but don't know what use you're going to get from that. But if you have it up and say it's like a little blaster, it works alright. Better than some weapon mounting I've seen on other movie figures. For a bit of a size comparison, here he is with a more modern deluxe with Siege Sideswipe, and like I said, he is quite large. Like I said, he is one of the larger deluxes in the line. So yeah, as you can see, absolutely dwarfs Siege Sideswipe by quite a bit. And for comparison with a little something closer to his time, here he is with Energon Deluxe Hotshot. Overall, Jazz has an absolutely stellar alt mode, which that is a phrase you are going to be hearing a lot in this series. But it's well sculpted, well painted, colors are fitting for the vehicle and accurate to the movie color scheme, and overall, like I said, it's a very pretty car. So yeah, overall, very solid alt mode. On to transformation.
Jazz ranks as a 2 in complexity, a basic conversion. It's pretty straightforward with a few interesting tricks along the way.
Jazz's transformation isn't exactly rocket science. We're gonna start off by coming to the back right here and untapping the back panel right here, swinging it up, and then swinging the back of the car forward and locking it into place. Bring these down, extend, rotate them around, flip down the feet and heels, They're a little finicky to get out, but we can't eventually get them out. Angle this back a bit, flip up. Spoiler right here. And, actually, split that hood on accident, but yeah, split the hood. And pull it up. Like that. We're going to come to back, swing around these little back sections right here. Underside. Swing them more like this and pull up the hood, flip out the hands, and then fold the hood onto itself, which it can be a little bit fiddly. Same thing on the other side. Flip out the hand, fold the hood onto itself, and swing the arms down into position. And then here's where we get into this line's overarching gimmick. To replicate the big, involved, sort of complicated transformations with a lot going on at the same time, we have automorph technology, which is basically doing one step will activate another step automatically. In the case of Jazz, folding back the backpack here and having it into place will pop up the head and cause some chest panels to shift around. Nothing too major, especially compared to some other automorphs that we'll be seeing on later on in the line. But overall, as a starting automorph, I think it's pretty solid. And there is the transformation complete. Jazz has one of the more orthodox robot modes in the line. Of course, Michael Bay Transformers and orthodox robot designs don't exactly go hand to hand, but compared to a lot of the other figures we'll be seeing later on in the line, he's one of the more humanoid and one of the more recognizable as his respective character. Putting him next to SS-86 Jazz, yes, this is a very different take on the character compared to SS-86 or G1 Jazz, but you can see they share quite a few design cues, such as the hood chest, the visor, and Petro Rabbit ears, and their basic transformation scheme is relatively the same, right down to how the backpack kind of folds up onto itself. Now, don't get me wrong, these are two very different figures and two very different designs. But compared to a lot of other movie designs, especially some of the ones we'll see later on, Jazz is pretty close to his G1 counterpart, all things considered. So much so that he even got a very nice G1 themed repaint that a lot of people use in their classics display back in the day. Now, let's get the elephant out of the room. His proportions are odd. As you can see, he is mostly leg with a very stumpy torso and interesting arms, to say the least. But given the line in general had a very alien feel, especially compared to the Unicron trilogy, which came right before, I can kind of give it a pass, especially considering that this was their first real time trying to capture these designs in plastic form. And for what they could do at the time, I think they did it very, very well. The head sculpt is pretty nice, somewhat indistinct, but still somewhat recognizable as Jazz. The light piping is absolutely gorgeous. Just a bright sapphire visor that catches the light so spectacularly. It is amazing. Very, very broad chest, very broad shoulders, and legs for days. But yeah, but you can see captures a lot of the details of the movie design pretty well. Some of them are a little bit more exaggerated than they probably should be, but overall, in the way of molded detailing, he's pretty spot on to how he looked in the movie. Very impressive for what they could handle at the time in the way of engineering right off the heels of the Unicron trilogy. And the fact that they could do this with Unicron trilogy era engineering basically is very, very impressive. As shown before, Jazz comes with one accessory, which is basically a jousting lance, which can be extended and retracted. And opening his arm right here, there is a 5mm hole right there, 5mm peg on the lance. Just plug it into his forearm, and now you have him with the jousting lance. The battle damaged remold of this guy does not come with this. It comes with the Crescent Cannon, which is more movie accurate, as well as the Japan only Movie the Best repaint comes with the Crescent Cannon. But honestly, I do not mind the jousting lance that much. It's a little cumbersome and kind of weird, but that's kind of why I like it. In the way of articulation, Jazz could be doing a little bit better for today's standards, but for the time, he was pretty standard. Ball jointed head, back and forth, in and out at the shoulders, bend at the elbow, simple bend, no swivel or anything, no waist, ball jointed hips, swivel at the knee, and a very slight bend. It's nothing too spectacular, but it's there. And for the transformation, a pivot at the toe. Nothing spectacular by today's standards, but Transformers articulation really wasn't standardized at the time, so I can kind of forgive him for being a little clunky in the way of posability. For size comparison, here he is with Sideswipe, and as you can see, they're about the same height, but Jazz is quite a bit bulkier and has quite a bit more mass to him. Like I said, two very different beasts from very different times. And for a more timely comparison for him, here he is with Energon Hotshot. And once again, two very different beasts, but a lot closer in size and overall mass. You can see they had definitely come a long way since Energon. Oops! Overall, Jazz is the quintessential car former for this line and is a great starting point for anyone wanting to collect the original 2007 Transformers line. His transformation isn't too complicated, but has enough going on to where it's not boring. Both modes look great. His articulation is a little lacking for today's standards, but for the time, he was fine, and it's about on par with the rest of his line. If you can find this guy for a good price, which is not difficult nowadays, I would definitely recommend picking him up. Especially if you just want Jazz for your movie shelf and you can't find the Studio Series because his prices are insane. I would definitely recommend picking this guy up. He is a very solid figure.
Jazz holds up remarkably well by today's standards. As the line's resident baseline car reformer, he pulled it off extremely well, and he has aged very well for a 15-year-old figure. See you guys next time, where we're gonna look at a figure that hasn't aged nearly as gracefully.